Fall camp is here. Football season is back. And that means it's time to start talking about week 1, Penn State and West Virginia. Hope you're excited. Hope you're ready for some debate, because I've got a guy that's about to sign on here in just a second that feels pretty strongly about Penn State's chances. So we're going to need you guys to help me out here. So he's a really good guy, though. I'm excited about it. All right. While we're waiting on him, we'll go ahead and do the ad read for this episode. And that way we can have all the freedom we need. All right, guys, stand by for the ad read really quick. Today's video is sponsored by Magic Shine Auto Spa and Tint in Morgantown, West Virginia. At Magic Shine, your vehicle care is their top priority. They use only the highest quality products to ensure your car not only looks its best, but is also protected and maintained with the utmost care. From window tinting with top-of-the-line Max Pro Tint to protective ceramic coatings from Diamond Protect, they've got you covered. Drive in today and experience the difference at Magic Shine Auto Spa and Tint, where your car shines like new. And don't forget to shine on, Morgantown. All right, guys, welcome into this episode of Mountaineer Paul Talks Football. Don't forget to like the video as you come in, if you don't mind. If you're watching this over on X, we appreciate you for being here. We will have a guest coming on in just a moment. He just told me he was grabbing a water, and he'll be right on. So he'll be here in just a moment. This guy's very pro Penn State. He is a Penn State content creator for Locked On. And so he feels strongly about the Nittany Lions' chances. And we just did a pre-recorded show for his show. And he's got a couple pretty good points, I'm not going to lie. So this is where I need you guys, man. I need you guys here. Don't forget about the super chat button down below as well, guys. And hey, look, if you want to join the channel, we've got a couple tiers. You can read about that. I'll be implementing a lot of those during the season. So let's see if you need to make sure I gave him the right link here. Yep, I gave it to him, right? Yeah, we got Shell Shock, Timothy. Cheers, Bears, and Mountaineers. All right, Timothy Green, Jada K, thank you guys for being here. Curtis D316, Brandon Cook, Russell Snyder, Matt Dix. Thank you guys all for being here. And if you're watching this on X and you want to join the conversation, you can come over here to the YouTube side of things and join the conversation that way. All right, guys, so we're going to bring on our guest now, and appreciate you guys for being patient while we did that. This guy is a very pro Penn State, to say the least. He does an incredible job over at Locked On Penn State Nittany Lions. Not sure which one it is, Penn State or Nittany Lions. We do have his social on X, scrolling across the bottom if you want to see that. But obviously, we're talking about none other than the great Zach. Is it Seyko?
Yes, it is.
From Locked On Penn State. How are you doing, Zach?
Hey, we're doing great. I appreciate that intro. Well, I'll try to. So it's funny because parts of my audience say I'm a little too critical of the Nittany Lions sometimes. But I definitely can say that I have a biased, pretty confident take on Penn State versus West Virginia. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
Boo. This guy's booing you.
To defend this.
Yeah, he's here to defend. I feel like I'm in that position to defend. Obviously we just did a show on your platform, and I kind of have a sense of how you feel about the game now. It's not as egregious as I thought it was. Now, I did listen to you and Spencer Saunders talk about it, and I felt like, man, he's not armed with all the facts. Mm-hmm. And so I'm glad you was able to let me reach out to you and kind of create this cool partnership here that we can talk Penn State, West Virginia, because for 2 straight years, man, this has been the first game of the year for both programs. It's been a talking point basically all offseason, although, I'm sure as Penn State fans, you have higher aspirations than beat West Virginia, no doubt.
Yeah.
But being any game that's the first game, as long as it's the Power 5 opponent, is going to catch a lot of airtime. It's just the way it works. So let's dive right in, Zach, as people continue to come in. You are fairly confident that Penn State might even cover the spread in this game. At least you said on the show. I think when we talked, you maybe had taken it back a notch to maybe not quite covering the spread, but really we're talking about wins and losses in here, and you feel confident in the Penn State chances as far as that goes. So kind of just put it all out there really quick, and then we'll kind of parse through it.
So I think this game is very similar, and that, I mean, people are probably going to think that's a pretty simple take, or it's a casual take, but I don't see a lot of differences between last year's Penn State team and this year's Penn State team, and that's the same thing with West Virginia, because you both have the cores of your group back, right? Garrett Green, Drew Allar. We talked about Donaldson and White running back for West Virginia, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen for Penn State, right? A bulk of the faces of each team are back, which means that they're going to do pretty similar things, except I think in Penn State's case, because they overhauled the offensive coordinator spot. They fired Mike Yursich midseason, and they brought in Andy Kotelnicki. And then defense, because they lost Manny Diaz, they bring in a defensive guru in Tom Allen. And they do lose some players here and there, but they're still primarily going to be the same on defense. And then they're going to make some tweaks on offense that limited them a season ago. And when I look at West Virginia, okay, yes, Garrett Green's going to naturally be a better quarterback. And I think he's going to cause Penn State problems defensively, but not enough. I think having C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White as a dynamic duo just allows you to not have, you're going to have your bruising running back and then someone that's a change of pace kind of guy that's going to throw defenses off. But I'm still not, when I look at West Virginia, I'm not confident in the wide receiver core as far as Garrett Green's options to throw to. I'm not confident in that secondary. I'm glad you talked about the front seven a lot more and how everybody's back and there's a lot of talent, but there's some first-time starters. So when I look at that, it's very identical to last season. Okay, Penn State's still good at what it does, even though it changed offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators. And West Virginia's still the same. They're going to try to shorten the game, ground and pound, and there's still a major question mark at secondary, even though they tried this overhaul that I don't think is going to be solved week one.
And that's fair. And I think, look, we've got camp to go, right? I mean, truthfully, we've got camp to go. We're going to find a lot more about both of these teams as fall camp goes on. Is Julian Fleming really going to turn into that stud, true number one wide receiver? That
I don't think he needs to be. He doesn't need to be.
Okay, that's a fair point too. Who besides Julian Fleming should we be worried about?
I'd say Amari Evans. So this is kind of an inside training camp battle that I haven't even talked about on my show yet, but I fully intend to. Amari Evans is pushing Julian Fleming for that second wide receiver spot. Trey Wallace is going to be wide receiver number one. Number two wide receiver is completely up in the air. I think it's going to be dependent a lot on game plan. So you're almost going to have a co-starter, but it's not just, it's Julian Fleming, he's going to play 100% of snaps. No, he's probably going to have a timeshare at that second wide receiver spot. There's going to be a timeshare in the slot wide receiver spot. And I think Penn State is just going to do it based on matchups. So, Paul, I would say that West Virginia's run defense is going to be better than the pass defense. So, given that fact, Julian Fleming is essentially an extra tight end. And so he was Ohio State's second best run blocker a season ago. And that's crazy to think. That's Ohio State with the amount of offensive linemen they send to the NFL. And Pro Football Focus said that Julian Fleming was the second best on the team. So when Penn State's going to run the ball, I don't think that's going to be so obvious when he's on the field. Oh, Fleming's on the field, they're going to run the football. No, but his run blocking was a strong element of why they wanted to bring him back to Pennsylvania, because Penn State could not run the football past 5-10 yards. Those explosive plays disappeared because they didn't have wide receivers that could block on the perimeter. And Julian Fleming solves that and then some. Amari Evans is probably the first or second fastest player on this Penn State team. So if West Virginia's pass defense is the weakness, we're probably going to see more of Amari Evans with Trey Wallace as the pass catchers go. And then Julian Fleming will, cycle in naturally because he's a fifth-year wide receiver. He went to Ohio State. I'm not saying that he's, not good or won't get better and won't be a valuable piece to Penn State's offense, but it's going to be very scheme dependent as far as what Penn State wants to do week to week.
So one thing I think, and we talked about this on your show a little bit, Colton Nickey is not the kind of offensive coordinator that can't change with what his personnel is, but we really haven't seen him as West Virginia fans outside of what they did there at Kansas. I just can't see you guys running that exact same scheme with the motion heavy. A lot of that was, I feel like they were deficient in talent in some areas at Kansas when he got there. Not at the end. They really filled it in. I mean, they've been recruiting at a top 30 level now since they were there. So, I mean, I wouldn't say talent deficiencies anymore, but when they got to Kansas, definitely, and that scheme was direct result of that. I don't think we're going to see the exact same scheme that we saw at Kansas. What say you?
Why not? Just because, and I'm not trying, and I don't mean that in a rude way, but to play devil's advocate, why not? Because there's a lot of misconceptions around, okay, Drew Allar's a statue. No, he's not. He can absolutely run limited quarterback option, but something to still keep defenses honest. The fact that Drew Allar can keep the football for 10, 15 yards is very much possible. He ran a 2-quarterback system at Kansas with Jalen Daniels and Jalen Bean. You can do the same thing with Drew Allar and Bo Prabula. Probably not that extent to a 50-50 or 60-40 timeshare, but it can work. Bo Prabula is going to see the field as that dual threat running quarterback. And then just like West Virginia has the dynamic duo running back, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are future. I mean, I'd like to believe that they're first-round picks, but probably at the end of the day, both second or third-round picks, and on the conservative side. So you only had at Kansas Devin Neal, and you had a 3-star or some. I mean, Andy Kotelnicki was able to make a walk-on redshirt quarterback look good and operate the offense like he knew what he was doing, like he was a seasoned veteran starter. Like that's what Andy Kotelnicki can now do with a 5-star quarterback, a 5-star running back, a high-end 4-star running back, a former 5-star receiver, some other high-end 4-star wide receivers, a 4-star tight end, and Tyler Warren, right? He has all these weapons at his disposal that he made look all those players at Kansas, other than Devin Neal and Jalen Daniels, the quarterback running back, he made them look way better than they actually were. Scheme matters, especially in college football.
It does. It does. What is Silas? He said, what? Garrett Green had not even started or led the team yet, and Jaheim White didn't even play. Both fair points. I think, of the things that I can say in W's defense, those are two of the biggest things. I think we talked about them a lot on your show. Jaheim White didn't play in the last 7 games and led all freshmen in rushing and led the nation in yards per carry. And Garrett Green is definitely not the same, but you even already said this. This is not the same iteration of Garrett Green that you guys saw.
No, I think Garrett Green's a lot better. I think he's the obvious X factor here against Penn State's defense.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's the kind of guy, and shout out to Inside the Gun, former West Virginia quarterback Jed Drenning. He does a podcast or a YouTube show / podcast where he broke down Garrett's passing and rushing and where he needs to get better and different stuff like that. And obviously he has access to a lot of that film, which I wish I could get my hands on. But interestingly enough, he was able to showcase some different things that Garrett Green that I really think are what you call X factors. And some of the most athletic players in the Big 12 had him dead to rights several times last year, which is why he basically led the country in sack prevention. He's so quick, and it's really hard to sack a guy that's 5'10", 5'11", 190 pounds that runs a 4.40, in any situation. Now, I'll be interested to see the foot race between him and your boy number 11. I would, because that guy can fly. What is his 40 time?
Well,
Probably
that's where it gets
4-5.
interesting because Abdul Carter was a traditional 4-3 line. Like he was going to be that off-ball linebacker and probably the spy against Garrett Green naturally. I don't know how Penn State's going to use him in week 1 and probably end up asking James Franklin. And he probably won't tell us because why would he? You know, that kind of reveals what you intend to do. But what we know this is that Abdul Carter is going to move between defensive end and linebacker. So he could be the spy and help out with the linebackers against Garrett Green, or he could be traditionally a pass rusher and be on the line of scrimmage. That's how versatile he is. I mean, Abdul Carter's a future first round pick. His speed's in that 4.4 range. At least it's not 4.3. That would be, I mean, he'd be first or second overall if that was the case, but he's definitely sub 4.5. He's in that 4.4 range and he's 6'4" and he's added weight. He was playing around to like under 250. He's up to 260, 265 right about now. So you combine that 4.4 speed with the extra 10, 15 pounds of weight, and it's almost unfair. Like they continue to
the best
find
player on the field. You know, he'll be the best player on the field.
him and KJ Winston. I think KJ Winston deserves a lot of recognition too. Those Carter and Winston, I think, are bona fide first round picks for Penn State's defense.
I better take this off here. Some people are getting mad. He has never said truthfully like West Virginia has no chance. Obviously,
I don't see a reasonable path to victory. That's my point. And when I say that West Virginia is the same, they're the same schematically and they're the same at their base. And that's the same thing for Penn State too. Okay, Drew Allar's back. Both running backs are back. Tyler Warren's back. They're not. What did they do well last year? They didn't turn the football over, so they're going to do that again. They're not going to turn the football over a whole lot because that's what Drew and the offense are geared to do. They just play conservatively, and they're still going to play conservatively because they didn't go out and get all these amazing playmakers. Sure, they got Julian Fleming, but then they lost Keandre Lambert-Smith. So you add one, you subtract one. West Virginia is still going to eat clock. Run the football, ground and pound. You have a future first-round pick at left tackle. You still have the big, why change anything? Why change it? Because it works. And I'm saying that Penn State and West Virginia are the same, like they're the same team. They do the exact same things, and I'd argue that Penn State does it better. They do it better. Penn State last year, if you look at the 12, 13 games they played, aside from the bowl game, every single game they wanted to ground and pound the football, and shorten the game and live off of good defense. It worked against everybody except single digits against Ohio State and single digits of Michigan. I don't think I'm crazy for saying that.
Well, there's a difference between no chance and not seeing a path to victory. You know what I mean? I think that's the
reasonable one. Drew could. I mean, what am I? But am I supposed to believe that West Virginia secondary is going to pick Drew off 3 or 4 times when he didn't even throw 3 interceptions a season ago? Like, that's what I mean. Or the 2 running backs that fumbled a combined 2 times last season and the season before that. And I'm supposed to believe that West Virginia is going to force, 3 or 4 turnovers. Like, that's the case. If West Virginia had like this defense that was ball hawking and attacking and could really throw Penn State off, but no, it's going to be about the team who can make the least amount of mistakes. And these 2 teams play mistake-free football. So then you have to look at, okay, well, now who's more talented? On paper, Penn State is more talented. There's the home field aspect of it, but that tells me, okay, this could be a 3 or a 4 point game. My score prediction at this very moment would be something like 27-20. Penn State.
I was hoping you'd leave that open. So I would say, look, outside of Abdul Carter, Wyatt Milam is the next most talented player on the field.
Yep.
He's a projected first-round draft pick in every mock. So, I do want to get that one straight. And then Tomas Remak will also be a top first through third round pick, somewhere in there. An incredible left guard for the Mountaineers going into his 3rd year. West Virginia has the better offensive line in this game. And I don't think it's a stretch to say it. It's not a stretch to say it.
No.
And West Virginia has added, we didn't talk about this on your show, but West Virginia has added an All-American at the pass rushing spot. I think that could make a huge difference in this game. So, let me pull it up really quick here. All right. And if you guys have any questions for Zach, guys, listen, I made the video this way, right? So you guys are fired up, but he's a good guy. So please, let's not get personal or anything. It's okay to be fired up over this, but let's not get personal or anything. All right. So,
well, allow the fan base to tell me what is a reasonable path for a West Virginia victory.
If you guys want to do that, and super chat buttons down below as well if you want to direct the conversation in any direction involving this game. But outside of that, I'll be looking for, obviously, the chats that's getting more full and more full. So it'll be hard to hone in on certain questions, but absolutely. Okay, how about this comment here? I think the two Northwestern guys that we got in the secondary are going to be factors for us this year. That's a great comment, Mountaineer Dad 31, and I brought it up on his show. There were two starters for Northwestern I think they had a top 60 defense or something like that.
I mean, Northwestern was pretty respectable last year. I mean, they were definitely they made a bowl game. They were performing way above expectations. Pat Fitzgerald got pushed out, all that stuff.
Which is crazy, but yeah.
I mean, it's still Northwestern, right? Penn State put up 40 points against them. And what my biggest concern, I think West Virginia eventually gets its secondary figured out.
Adding 6 guys in week 1 is going to be tough.
Exactly.
I don't want to go off of the.
Yeah, you just don't know who's going to match up well. And again, Penn State's doing the same thing. They have other wide receivers that they're just going to utilize more. So that Amari Evans, everyone's going to be like, okay, he's a former 3-star, but he's arguably the fastest player on the team. For whatever reason, Mike Yurcich did not want to try to do anything that was explosive or anything or create explosiveness. Andy Kotelnicki's prime objective here is how many plays can we get successfully that are 20-plus yards. So I'm not saying Penn State's going to air it out and do become an air raid, Mike Leach, rest in peace, Mike Leach type of offense. However, Penn State is not going to, okay, we're just going to run the ball 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards. Hopefully we got a first down. They're going to have other elements sprinkled in, and that's where Andy Kotelnicki kind of helps with that because he brings the creativity. I mean, all the different polling offensive linemen. And again, that was you saw Westford. I know those were different teams, different years, but look at how many points he was able to score against West Virginia with that Kansas roster. So imagine what he's able to do with respect to this game with Penn State's players.
Those are fair points. I just think that
I don't think Penn State puts up 50. I'm just saying, if you can do those, if you can accomplish what Kansas did with 2 stars and 3 stars and guys that are unranked and make the especially when Kansas's defense did not help them out at all. Kansas defense was one of the worst in the country year in and year out, and that was why they were not a better team. So now you also have Penn State's defense to kind of back you up and just allow the offense to get short fields. Kansas was able to do that successfully, driving 80, 90 yards consistently. Now you have a Penn State defense forcing some turnovers, giving you, in opponent territory, that kind of things. Those things add up. And that was the problem last year for Penn State, is that the offense didn't help out at the defense by giving that, sustaining drives against the better opponents, sustaining drives and giving them more green to work with, right? The defense was always bailing out the offense, and it's going to start to correct itself and come back to the middle a little bit. So West Virginia gets better at all the things that it's already good at. And I think that's the same case for Penn State. The thing that's different now, if Drew was a first-time starter, if this was last year's Penn State team and this was in Morgantown, I could absolutely see an upset and be like, West Virginia, the lights, because that happened against Ohio State. That was Drew's first true road game, true sophomore, right? First time getting a serious opponent to go up against. And Penn State's offense folded. Defense did great. They held Ohio State to 20 points. But that's the thing. Drew's a veteran. Singleton's a veteran. Allen's a veteran. Warren's a veteran. All their key guys have done this now. This is their 3rd, 4th year running. They're not a brand new team. They're not deer caught in headlights.
And all those are fair points. I just think that there is a path to victory for West Virginia, and it's absolutely, in my opinion, with the offensive line. I think that's definitely, if I had to say one place where I feel like West Virginia has a solid advantage, and that includes your defensive line. Although I think
Well, that's going against a top. So Penn State defensively last season was a top 5 run defense in terms of yards per carry. I think West Virginia is probably going to average between 4 or 5 yards, but is that going to be enough to get a win? Is that going to be enough to get them a victory?
Well, it's one piece of it. Absolutely. I think the addition to this guy here will make, he's been getting rave reviews, obviously, all camp long. This is a 2-time All-American in Ty French, a guy that's had almost 20 sacks the last 2 years. Putting him at Bandit is going to make a big difference against, let's just be honest, a very patchwork offensive line at Penn State. Probably the weakest spot on the team. You guys have a lot of what I would consider higher end players just because of who you recruit, but there is not a whole lot of proven commodities on your offensive line. I think in the middle, basically your entire middle's gone, right? Is that what I remember reading, or is it your outside that's gone? Which one is it?
So the defensive line's back, other than Chop Robinson and
no
Adisa
offensive
line. Offensive line, they'll have a new starting center. Guards will be the same, and both starting tackle jobs are up for grabs.
That's what it was. So your center and 2 tackles are all brand new.
Yeah,
that's a factor, a big one. I mean, if you can make the point about West Virginia's secondary and replacing so much back there is a factor. Well, people often say, the back end and offensive line work similarly in that they all have to work together and move basically, together. So I think the Penn State offensive line is a question mark coming into this game.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So does West Virginia have the best defensive line in the country? No. But I do believe that they've added and as far as developed enough to – they held you guys to 146 yards rushing last year, which is – we'll take that again this year. It'll be interesting to see, because I was really worried about Allen and Singleton coming into last year. And I still am again this year, total respect for them. But I feel like truly West Virginia, I'll say I don't think C.J. Donaldson is technically better than Allen or Singleton, but I do think Jaheim White is the best running back in this game.
Wow.
I know you just kind of figured him out, but he's not new to us. He's probably the best player on the offense. That includes Garrett Green. By the end of the year, I wrote an article a month ago that predicted he would be the player of the year offensively in the Big 12. I truly believe that. I don't know if you've seen Jaheim White film yet, but he gets compared to Tavon Austin a lot, which I wouldn't go that far with it. But just my opinion, I think if I'm looking for edges for us, and then we're in debate about what path to victory is there for West Virginia. I think Jaheim White in more areas than one because he affects the passing game as well. He was the leading receiver for his entire high school as a running back, so he's very good at catching the ball. He had a couple scores through the air for us last year. We need him to produce, but he is one of those. He's very much like Darren Sproles, I would say, is a good comparison for him, being that he's a small, so he really hides well behind offensive linemen, and then he's so quick and shifty. If he gets in the open field, you're not tackling him with one guy. He doesn't have elite breakaway speed, but he's at that 4.5-ish level, but he can be caught. But, as far as 50, 60-yard chunks, yeah, he does that well. And then, obviously you lean on a guy like Wyatt Milam. I would love to see him and Abdul Carter go at it, but that's probably not going to be what happens. And so West Virginia replaces his starting right tackle. I would imagine Abdul Carter will probably be over on that side instead of Wyatt Milam, or maybe they use him over there.
They'll flip whichever side to fit the matchup. They're not boxed into, like, they'll have whichever, like, preferential side, right? Like a right defensive end versus a left defensive end, but they'll flip according to formation or matchup.
I don't know what this says, but it has your name starting, so I wanted to read it. Here we go. Zach Seyko. This guy's name is Forrest. He's also a West Virginia content creator, so I do respect his opinion generally. You're basing much of the defense on your assumption that the WVU secondary will be good. If you're wrong, and he thinks you are, that's one path to a West Virginia win. Well, I mean, I get where you're coming from there. It's just that it's, our secondary is an unknown, much like their offensive line is an unknown. But if it's right, yeah, absolutely. If it's right, then that is a big game changer. I do know that they're talented guys, coming in. And this staff so this is the third year in a row that they've had to recruit heavily to the secondary. And they have figured out a formula that they like for what we do. It's like the Belichick thing. The reason they were good for so long is because they knew the type of player they wanted for said role on defense or offense, right? As long as you can find a player that fits these parameters and they're a good locker room guy and they learn the playbook, they're probably going to be good in this spot. And that's what they've really done well for us coming into this year. And then we feel like they did the best job with the 6 they brought in. They all had their own. I mean, 2 of them were all conference players, and the other 2 were the best players on a Power 5 defense that was decent last year. So we do feel like they're good players, but in game 1, you just don't know what you're going to see them all the way around, really.
Well, I'm wondering what West Virginia's primary game plan is defensively. Like, what are they going to focus on Singleton and Allen because and Penn State was a run heavy first team? Or are they going to say, well, they did bring in Julian Fleming, Trey Wallace is 100% again? Like, I wonder, because when I look at West Virginia, I can confidently say, okay, you're going to spy Garrett Green and you're going to try to stack the box to limit the ground game and force West Virginia into 3rd and 6 plus 3rd and 7, right? At least at the very minimum. So it's West Virginia. I guess if you want to start to like put together a reasonable, like, okay, what's their path to victory? They have to win every single first down. Can they get 5, 6, 7 yards every single first down? And that's where the RPO is going to have to come into play. So how good is the wide receiver core? Rodney Gallagher is a former 4-star, and Penn State recruited him. I know Penn State really wanted him, and he ended up staying closer to home and went with West Virginia.
Right.
I know that Preston Fox is back, and I think like he's a respectable like slot receiver. Do you want to bet? Is there somebody that could be better there? Yeah, but I think Preston Fox is like a fine player, but there's obviously a lot of wide receivers that could be better than him. And then the transfers that they brought in, it's kind of like the same thing with Julian Fleming. They didn't wow at their other places. That's why they were in the portal, because they didn't either maximize what was the issue? Why did they leave their previous institution? So it's West Virginia's wide receivers don't like strike enough confidence in me to say, okay, well, the RPO is going to be extremely effective. I feel like Penn State's defensive backfield can win its one-on-one battles more often than not, so that they can stack the box with 7 or 8, who knows, maybe even 9 defenders in certain cases, because I think you have to sell out for Garrett Green and find a way to tire out one of Donaldson or White, because that's going to be annoying to chase down Jaheim White. And then Donaldson just runs right up the middle and lowers the shoulder. Like that is going to be an issue for Penn State to stop.
Yeah. Trae Ray is far and away the best receiver on the team. We didn't even mention him earlier. Sometimes you forget names, but Trae Ray is, he was a freshman last year and no doubt the number 1 receiver on this team.
Okay.
He was obviously playing in his first game last year against Penn State, much like a lot of things. But Trae Ray is the guy. If I had to point to anybody, he went for 80 in the first play in the bowl game against UNC. He really turned it on at the end of last year. And to me, most people would agree either he or Bray from Oklahoma State will be in contention for the number 1 receiver job. So, Ray, if he takes the next step in his evolution, and most people think he will. I do. I really do think Ray will. Of all the guys we've talked about, Trae Ray, I think he's going to be somebody to watch out for. And then Cole Taylor is a factor, definite factor.
And that's,
I think he gets lost in the conversation a lot, man. You got a guy that caught almost 50 balls at the tight end spot. That's significant.
And that's where I think Penn State's talent in the defensive back, right? You're kind of comparing apples to oranges at that point. So, okay, I don't, it's not that I don't think any of these guys are talented, but then when I look at, okay, both these teams play mistake-free football, and then it's, okay, well, West Virginia's number one wide receiver, did X, Y, Z, and Penn State brings in a former top 50 player in the nation, a top 10 cornerback who was committed to Georgia once upon a time. And then when you look at that matchup on paper, you're going to take an AJ Harris versus, you said a Trae Ray, for example, just based on what you see on paper. Now, again, that's going to happen on the football field, but as far, and I'm peeking at the comments here and there and whatnot. I'm not saying that West Virginia doesn't have a chance, but aside from forcing, 2-3 turnovers, I feel like they're just going to kind of trade punches here and there. And I think Penn State gets that final punch.
Right.
We're talking about wins and losses here. If West Virginia covers the spread, if this is a 31-24 game, which is pretty realistic, well, they covered 10.5 points. You're happy if you put some money on the spread. And the total goes over, but that's right in that range. That's kind of like the expected result is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30-23, 31-24. That's at least what Vegas thinks, and I think that's very realistic. Whoever gets to 30 wins this game.
Probably, yeah, probably. It's a lot of this is just not quantifiable, right? Obviously, we don't know who's going to turn the ball over. We don't know who's going to be sick that day. We don't know who's going to come to play in a big game in a big stadium that gets pretty loud. Although I don't think that'll bother Penn State too much, just keeping it real, guys.
If this was last year's team, yes. Drew was a first-time starter. Singleton and Allar were both sophomores.
He didn't play like a first-time starter.
at home against West Virginia, but then when he had those road games, that's where people were like, okay, what's wrong with Drew?
Oh, yeah.
Why is Drew not living up to that 5-star status? And
Illinois comes to mind, yeah.
And Penn State said, Drew's not the problem. It's Mike Yursich and the play calling. I mean, Penn State has subtly said that every single time they've been, and James Franklin and different players, when they point to it, and it's like, they don't say it was Mike Yursich's fault. That's not what they're saying, but they're saying, well, the offense lacked explosiveness, and wide receivers struggled to get open. But they didn't really make a lot of changes at wide receiver. They brought in Julian Fleming and they lost Keandre Lambert-Smith because Auburn came calling and NIL money's on the table. And Keandre Lambert-Smith did not like the fact that Penn State said you're going to be in a competition after you were wide receiver number 1. Like that's KLS could have ended up being wide receiver number 3 in this year's group. If not worse, I don't think he liked the idea that he would, after being wide receiver number 1, that he would have to recompete for his job. And that's ultimately why he ended up in the portal, not because he said, Auburn's, a better spot. It was a better spot for him. But at the end of the day, like that's what happened. They were like, your number 1 spot isn't guaranteed. You're going to have to compete for that and the second spot and the third spot. So they didn't make all these radical changes except offensive coordinator. So that tells me that the problem was Mike Yursich and not the wide receivers or the running backs or Drew. Again, Drew had 2 interceptions to 25 touchdowns. That's not bad. Why does everyone say that's bad?
Oh yeah, I don't think it's bad. You never hear me say it's bad.
Right.
But I would also point out that Garrett's numbers are really good too. Although they didn't throw it as much as you guys quite. But I don't know. The quarterback comparison to this game is so interesting because Garrett, obviously not the 5-star pedigree, really look kid, which tell Baker Mayfield that. Obviously stars matter. But at this point in their careers, I think it's a real conversation of who would you take between the two. And it's a fun conversation because obviously Garrett running for almost 1,000. Well, I don't want to exaggerate that much. Almost 800 yards and 13 touchdowns is extremely significant. And then what he did in the passing game, which was 4 picks, right? 2,500 yards, or what was it? 1,600 yards or 2,400 yards. Somebody help me out. I can't remember all the numbers off the top of my head, guys. But I have a play. I wanted to give you a little look at Trae Ray, just so you can see him. Here's the video against UNC. I'll share the screen really quick. I mean, obviously one play is not going to tell much, but I think everybody would like to see it. And I can't kind of fell off. They really didn't. They were one of those teams that people were like, what happened to them? But, yeah, so Traelin's going to be, I think, a real impact player for us this year. I bang on the table with that all the time. But outside of him, I think there are some question marks. Hudson Clement obviously led the team in receiving, but he was out for so long. You know, a lot of people are really high on him. I am high on him, just not as high as some others. I think the 2 transfers that, you mentioned playing for Georgia, Justin Robinson did that. He was recruited by as a high-end 4-star kid and played and scored while a member of the Georgia Bulldogs, and then the same at Mississippi State, with a very similar quarterback in Will Rogers as Garrett Green. I think that plays a factor. But your points about them not wowing and how is that all going to transfer are both very fair. Both very, very fair.
Yeah, I think I mean that you could apply the same standard to Julian Fleming, AJ Harris.
Right. That was what I was going to say.
Is that AJ Harris? I don't think him and Robinson would have crossed paths at Georgia. I think they were adjacent to one another because he would have been at Mississippi State. But yeah, kind of the same thing. You end up at Georgia. You don't play enough. See the field as a special teams guy. I mean, I can say from the intel that I have is that AJ Harris has come in. He's fitting that mold of it. He's not going to be the next Joey Porter Jr., but he has traits and elements that Penn State says, okay, we feel confident enough to put you as our number 1 cornerback, where we isolate you and we say, hey, go follow the number 1 wide receiver or shut down a side of the field. That's what they have planned for AJ Harris. There's not quiet concerns like, oh, he's not panning out or he still has a long way to go. AJ Harris had a really good spring. As far as Julian Fleming goes, Julian Fleming has told us, and the coaches have backed this up, that he's the healthiest he's ever been. So a lot of his shortcomings at Ohio State can be related to the fact that he was banged up for the most part. Not all the time, but he admitted that he was just never really 100%. So hopefully he stays healthy through training camp. Your training camp's tomorrow, Wednesday, July 31st, and then goes 30 days out to the game here. Hopefully Julian Fleming is able to stay to stay healthy. Like that's the best ability is availability. So all these guys at the end of the day on both teams don't even matter if they can't even play. I would say who's the guy in West Virginia that's kind of like injury prone? Like would it be Jaheim White or would it be
no, not Jaheim White. It was a freshman last year.
Okay, so it's just a matter of no playing
prone
time.
Yeah, he just didn't play the first 7 games just because he was a freshman. You know how that works sometimes. He was behind a couple guys that we thought were going to play better. And then, I mean, we knew all offseason that he had impressed. You hear about you hear players every year like that. Yeah. He just got inserted against UCF and didn't have the freshman mistakes that you normally have. He was just one of those really, and I had him on. He's just one of those really mature freshmen, sure. And it happens. But as far as injury prone goes, Aubrey Burks, who is going into last year was being called the best safety in the country. And we haven't even mentioned him, have we? Forgot all about that today. You get to thinking about where you want to go with stuff and you forget things. But he's back and he took a step back last year. A lot of us were disappointed in how he played. They moved in positions, and he has flourished so far in the summer. We'll see how it goes in the fall. But he is going to be playing a hybrid linebacker safety role. Which
I see that on the depth chart, yeah.
And, but he's by far, as far as pedigree goes on defense, He and Sean Martin. They've been playing on this defense for 2-3 years now as starters. So Sean is another guy who has been extremely solid. He's right on the edge of that all Big 12 caliber player. And, they feel like he's going to do it this year. TJ Jackson's another player I'll throw at you really quick. He was the best defensive lineman on Troy and come over in the portal, obviously moved up, wanted to get on some NFL radars. And, he and I are pretty close. He's really been, according to some of the offensive linemen, been disruptive this offseason. And this offensive line room, what they've been the last 3 years, if they say a player is playing well or is disruptive, you have to pay attention to that, because there are not many players that, at least on our defense, that would consider disruptive like that. But I do agree with you that this is going to be a close game as far as 7-ish points one way or the other.
Yeah.
I don't think it's, like I said, I came on here to defend West Virginia, and as far as I will never agree in this game that there's no chance. But I do think Penn State should be favored, and that's the fair way to look at it. You guys know on this show, I try to be as unbiased as possible and look at the realities of the situation. This is a fan show, but at the end of the day, what credibility do I have if I just lie to myself? So, I think West Virginia has some advantages that you don't know or see, because obviously you're a Penn State guy and you're looking at their stuff and don't have the intimate knowledge that I have, and vice versa. I have some basic knowledge of Penn State, just like you have basic knowledge of West Virginia. And then you just have to look at the straight up talent aspect of it, in that you guys recruit 4 and 5 stars and we recruit 3 and 4 stars. And every so often do we get a 5. So, there is an inherent talent advantage. But what I do like about this staff is, here the last couple of years anyway, they've really shown the ability to develop. And if you can keep players in this day and age, I think it matters. And I think West Virginia and Penn State both are in the top 20 nationally in returning players. So It's all about figuring out that mix, right? That secret sauce. Because like I was telling somebody the other day, there's not been a college basketball team yet to go straight transfers and win it, because I don't think that's how it's going to happen. I think the FAUs of the world that have 3 or 4 returning starters and add a couple guys, those are the teams that win. You just can't expect to win with a brand new team every year, unless you're talking about you add 5 LeBron James type players or something crazy. But it'll be interesting in this game, man. I'm really, really. It's going to be fun to keep track of both teams' progress coming up until fall camp, and hope no injuries happen on either side. Tyler Cobb, I meant to say this earlier. The biggest thing is he's underrating the home field advantage. Allar is not good on the road, and this is going to be a top 10 West Virginia atmosphere of all time. I just wanted to say, if this was a night game, Tyler, I think I would agree with you. It's going to be tough on a big noon kickoff to get to top 10 all time. But I do think it will be, there's no doubt, it will absolutely be a tough atmosphere. Don't get me wrong. I just don't know in a day setting if you can get there. But maybe they will. It'll be interesting to see. Real quick, guys, Zach's socials are scrolling underneath here, at Zach_Seyko. And also, he does the Locked On Penn State or Nittany Lions. Which one is it?
Officially Locked On Nittany Lions, but you search the two on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, you'll find it. Okay,
or on YouTube or on podcast form, and you can keep caught up with how Penn State's doing all fall camp long. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We'll definitely have training camp starts tomorrow. I'll be there. They'll have weekly availability to go watch practice for 15, 20 minutes, get some post-practice interviews. James Franklin will typically do a press conference. Players will be made, assistant coaches, players will be made available and stuff. And we'll football's finally here. Like we'll be no more of the like, oh, how's your summer going? What'd you, like what actual game questions like, how do you intend to stop Donaldson and White, or what's the focus on trying to limit Garrett Green? And I know we're not going to get a straightforward answer, but at least, we'll be able to ask.
Yeah. That's the funny question is I really don't know. I think if you're going to try to limit Garrett Green based off of the past, you have to try to make him throw intermediate throws. That's where he struggled, right? He's been not just bad, but really bad at throwing the intermediate throws. I get to shaking my knee sometimes and don't realize my camera's shaking. But I think, that all accounts is obviously just like somebody who's bad at free throws or whatever you want to say. He's really worked on that. And then the Manning Passing Academy, that's just kind of hard to say fast. They said, he really performed well there, but that's without defenders in your face. I think his height is one of the smaller issues to do with his intermediate passing. And the other side of that is he literally was, by the numbers, the best deep ball thrower in America last year. That's among all Power 4 college quarterbacks. And he threw a lot of them. He throws an incredible deep ball. It's one of the best I've seen. So why not just play to his strengths anyway? You don't have to – just because somebody doesn't throw that many intermediate passes doesn't mean that you should automatically try to do that, just to make him better there. Like, just do what he's good at. But there are ways with coverage to make him have to throw more of those. And maybe that's one way.
And that's what I'm ultimately trying to say here is that, no, West Virginia doesn't have a 0% chance to win, but okay, they're going to want to run RPO, option heavy, run the football because that's who your best players are. Penn State's going to primarily run the football because they have Singleton and Allen. It goes the same thing for Donaldson and White. If they tried to air it out week in and week out, I'd be questioning what Neil Brown and the offensive coordinator are trying to put together, especially when Garrett Green isn't a passer first. He's a run first quarterback. You have two running backs that you return all of your the 700 plus rushers from a season ago. You're going to play into that strength. So the difference maker for West Virginia here are the pass catchers. Can they get open in one-on-one? Because everybody's going to stack the box. It's not just Penn State. Every opponent's going to stack the box and spy Garrett Green. And I think because of what Penn State's returning, and because this is what they play, this is what they've done. They played against Michigan. Ohio State now does this, where they run heavy against Illinois, right? West Virginia plays Big Ten football. They play run heavy, run first Big Ten football with an element of a mobile quarterback. So Penn State, if this was maybe a USC, right? If West Virginia was playing a USC and was like a 4 or 7 point underdog or something like that, I would take West Virginia. I'd say West Virginia should probably be favored in that kind of game.
You're saying this is a strength on strength.
Yeah, I think it's Penn State is prepared for that. You have a top 5 run defense from a season ago. It's not, Penn State, was barely top 50. They lost. They're returning all 4 of their starting. They rotate defensive linemen frequently. They have all 4 of their main defensive tackles back to go along with a top 5 run defense in yards per carry. They have Abdul Carter moving down to defensive end to make up for Chop Robinson. Denai Dennis Sutton is now back. He was a co-starter at defensive end a season ago.
He's a good player.
So Curtis Jacobs is really only your big loss in terms of trying to stop the run. Kobe King came back. Don DeLuca came back. Those guys are run first linebackers. So if Penn State had a bunch of question marks, I think, again, the biggest question mark is which linebacker is going to be able to keep up with Garrett Green. The key here is what kind of yardage can Garrett Green create by himself? Can he create enough deception? Because I don't think that West Virginia's wide receivers will be able to win all of their battles against Penn State's defensive backfield in one-on-one situations. Penn State's going to stack the box. They're going to try to play 8 guys down in the box. They're going to have 1 safety over the top, and they're going to dare West Virginia to throw those 10 yards. They're going to sell out for the run. Can West Virginia win on 1st and 2nd down so that they can still have the element of surprise? And that's where I think not a lot of things changed last year where Penn State still can't do that, and they play against that year in and year out in the Big Ten.
Smack the Devil asked the question, which is one of the best names on my board. Zach, do you think Penn State is looking at this game as a tune-up, or do you think they will be hungry like it's a challenge?
I mean, this is one of those regional games. I mean, they think of this as, I mean, they're getting ready to play Syracuse in a couple of years. This is a big deal for them. They know that, I mean, West Virginia finished the season strong. Some people are picking them as silent contenders or they should be the dark horse contender for a sleeper pick to win the Big 12. It's them and Utah essentially. And I buy into that, right? Again, West Virginia has all of its core players back, just like Penn State. There's no reason that Penn State couldn't contend for the Big 10, and there's no reason that West Virginia couldn't contend for the Big 12. Both teams are better this year.
You want to hear what happened, by the way? I'm playing College Football 25, right?
Yeah.
I'm playing the one where where it's just you playing as a player, so this is really what happened. I'm playing on the Heisman, by the way, the hardest difficulty, and I lost to Penn State in week 1, right? And went 11-1, and then met Penn State in the playoff, and beat them. You know, that was crazy. I thought, man, wouldn't that be cool if this happened in real life? But I didn't mean to cut you off there. But I do think, Penn State's going to be a great litmus test for West Virginia. If West Virginia wins, especially, God, if West Virginia wins, everybody will freak out.
That's huge. That's huge.
Obviously, they're the Big 12 favorite at that point, right? How could they not be? Penn State's a top 7 team in the country. But even if they play close within 7 points, let's say, I really still think that all that hope would still be alive for us, in conference play. Because I think both teams – my buddy that has the X account, Penn State Strong, he was rooting for West Virginia in every game after we played last year, So I remember texting him that when the Houston game happened, when they hit the big Hail Mary to beat us as time expired. If that game doesn't happen, West Virginia's a 10-win football team.
Yeah.
Wild.
I think both teams have a lot to prove. Penn State, it is prepared for West Virginia. I wonder what West Virginia is thinking as far as, okay, they faced Andy Kotelnicki before. I think that's an important point that more people should be talking about. Right. Is that they have faced them. Neil Brown has seen an Andy Kotelnicki offense before. But now you have better players in that. So you have to account for the 2-quarterback system. You have to account for all of the weirdness of it. Any Kotelnicki offenses can be really weird, where you have linemen polling, you have receivers going one way and then circling all the way back around. Like, there was just no creativity in that in a Mike Yurcich offense. And I'm just wondering, with the talent that Penn State has, what can you do to open things up? Because again, if Penn State was really concerned about its backfield or if its offensive line or its wide receivers, they would have done what West Virginia did with its DBs and go out and get 4 or 5, 6 different players and push other guys into the portal. They went and got one wide receiver, one offensive tackle. They got another offensive guard that played at Air Force late, like really late. Like he just got added to the roster a week or two ago. So he'll be a depth piece. But the guy they got from Wisconsin, Nolan Rucci, is going to be somebody that's going to try to play starter reps or at least cycle in, not just be somebody distant on the bench. But that Julian Fleming, Nolan Rucci, AJ Harris, like they did that with DBs because there was so much turnover that they went and they added so many other players. So if the personnel was the problem and not the coach, Mike Yurcich would have been back. And because of the transfer portal is great. Players can move around and go wherever they want. Coaches can force people to go in the portal and say, you're not playing here. We're taking your scholarship. Go hop in the portal. Those conversations very much happen.
So I wanted to see what you thought about this question from Drumwolf. Penn State doesn't have the players for that offense. Just wanted to hear your response.
Which part of it? Because Andy Kotelnicki doesn't have a base offense. Like you can't. Yes, Penn State has a playbook available in NCAA, but you don't have all of the types of plays that Andy Kotelnicki is going to ultimately run. with Penn State. So they have the two quarterbacks, right? They can do the two quarterback system and they can run option read. Drew Allar's not a statue. He can actually run the option. They're not going to run him a lot, but Bo Prabula is going to come in and they're going to run two quarterback stuff. The only thing
Bro Prabula is a lot like Garrett Green, right?
I'd say he's a poor man's version of Garrett Green because Bo Prabula can't. He's not obviously not starting for a reason. Drew Allar's still the better pure quarterback, but he gives you an element, and he would have entered the portal if he didn't feel like he was going to be used in the offense or be the quarterback in waiting at Penn State. Like, come on, this is his third season and he hasn't really seen the football field that much. With the portal, why did you not enter? There's obviously big plans for him to be used in Wildcat, alternate type of packages that Mike
Yurcich like a Trace McSorley, right?
Yeah, I mean that's what everybody compares him to. He wears number 9. He's 6'2", so Trace McSorley's 5'11", 6 foot, and Bo Prabula is actually like just
probably a good Garrett Green comparison, really.
Larger, he's just a larger player. We need to see more of him as a passer. If Bo Prabula can develop as a passer, he can be that Trace McSorley type, where he's a true dual threat quarterback. We just don't know how good of a passer Prabula is. That's why Allar is still the starter, because he's a former 5-star, but also, I mean, Drew, again, 25 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. There's a reason NFL scouts do like him as a prospect. He's smart. He doesn't turn the football over. He's good at just, surviving he's able to, most quarterbacks, when they get scared, they'll throw the football, they'll like into harm's way, they'll take a sack. Drew Allar's very good at doing two things: one, protecting the football, and protecting a drive. So we're still waiting to see him light up the box scores and do everything, but basically play West Virginia every single week where he has 300 plus yards. And that's still probably not going to happen when you have 2 future NFL prospects at running back. And just the way that Andy Kotelnicki likes to operate, like, this isn't a spread air raid type of offense. Drew Allar will probably have a similar stat line of around 3,000 yards, probably some more touchdown passes, maybe a couple more interceptions. So it'll be in that neighborhood of 3,000, 30 touchdowns, maybe 4 or 5 interceptions, just by nature of play calling. But Drew protects the football. And he's a much better passer than Bo. Much better passer.
Oh yeah, he's an incredible passer. Listen. I got heat for telling people I loved Drew Allar last year. I did, but I'm going to combine 2 comments here before we go, because we've been at this for an hour, and I know you got another stream we got to do later. Big Baller Production said, Penn State fan here. Zach completely ignored Penn State losing 3 corners, one of the best defensive coordinators. And just assuming Andy Kotelnicki will magically turn into a firepower, very little to none proven wide receivers. And then also, let me just throw on top of that really quick, just so we can knock them both out. It went down on me. Okay. The Penn State offensive line, secondary, also being a question. And obviously, always the 2 new coordinators. That's a lot more uncertainty than you would think, just on the surface.
So Penn State's secondary was, I think, a little actually overrated towards the end of the season. Kalen King, but he viewed Kalen King as a future 1st or 2nd round pick. He ended up being a 7th round pick. And I'm surprised that he almost went undrafted, actually. That's a little strange. Daquan Hardy.
B.D. Bishop start for the Steelers from West Virginia. Anyway, sorry.
Daquan Hardy was, he was good. He played a lot of years. Yes, you're losing a lot of starting cornerbacks for Penn State. You do return KJ Winston, who's a future 1st round pick. I think Jalen Reed's underrated. He's probably going to be that slot cornerback as an extra safety, because he can do both. He's not just a run support. He is a guy that can cover man-to-man and zone and act as an extra linebacker. Like, he is truly that versatile, and I think eventually Jalen Reed will get drafted. And then you have Zach Wheatley, who's been waiting in the wings, and everybody unprovoked in Penn State's camp has said, if you're looking for a breakout player, it's Zach Wheatley. So Penn State's going to run 3 safety sets to accommodate what they lost at cornerback. And those guys either have been here, they've all been here for 3-4 years. They've been around for a while. They brought in A.J. Harris, who was former Georgia cornerback, top 50 recruit in the nation. They brought in Jalen Kimber, who's played SEC football. He was just down at Florida. He's going to come in. And then they have Cam Miller, who's a former 4-star and played as one of those co-starters at quarterback. He saw a good amount of time last year. So I would say they're losing about truly 2 starters at cornerback, but I think they'll just be fine. I don't have any concerns in the secondary. I am concerned about that offensive line. They lost 3 NFL starters from an offensive line that was average, which is surprising when you have 3 NFL players. It's average. So I agree with that. I am concerned about the offensive line.
And I think that's, if there is a problem there, then West Virginia's chance to win really goes up, exponentially, because Drew Allar, while he can be mobile, he's not necessarily mobile from within the pocket while dropping back to pass as much as when you put him on the run naturally, right? You got to give him some momentum to be truly what I think dangerous for him at like 10 to 15-yard runs, like you were saying. If he's just dropping back to pass, he's had trouble at times.
He's really shifty in the pocket, though. Like, Drew Allar is very good at reading.
He's tough to bring down. That's his biggest, in my opinion.
Because he's good at reading the blitzes. It's not that he's able to stiff arm a defender, it helps when he's 240 pounds, but he's able to slide within the pocket and still keep his eyes downfield. Like, he's got really good footwork within the pocket, but I agree with some of the comments. When you do pressure him and you have him rolling away from his non-throwing side, he'll forget. But again, you hope that that's better, right? If he makes the same mistakes that he did a season ago, which those are, first-year starter,
second-year starter, you have to assume he's going to be the furthest thing from the problem. I'm not coming into this thinking Drew Allar is going to be the problem. And if you are, you're delusional. I think there's a way to confuse and especially on the road, Drew Allar, and into the offensive line isn't up to par. That might be one way. We do have a couple guys that we feel like can get after the quarterback this year from the inside and out. And maybe that's one avenue to victory there. But obviously the more low scoring this game is, the more it benefits West Virginia rather than Penn State.
Yep.
So we got to make sure we get that on record as well.
Right. Like I said, West Virginia's game plan is going to be ground and pound, control the football, because they know they're not going to be able to naturally force turnovers. Is there a fluke play, a botch snap that possibly happens? Absolutely, but it's not because, Drew Allar's an interception machine. Singleton and Allen are vulnerable to fumbles here and there. It's going to have to be, you hope for a muffed punt or something like that. So West Virginia is going to have to continue, and I'm saying that Penn State is not vulnerable to that. They're not susceptible to that. It's going to be, kind of a rock and a hard place here, and which one wins. And that's where I go back to who has the more talent, Penn State.
Yeah, except when you start to break it down like we have, I think that there are notable things in West Virginia's favor. Just as confident as you were about the guy, the corner or safety, whoever you said was going to break out this year, I'm as or more confident that Trae Ray will be a bona fide number 1 star wide receiver. Like
him and AJ Harris. I hope that's the exciting match. He's definitely, for anybody like Penn State or West Virginia, unbiased. He has to be an X factor for them because again, Penn State's going to sell out for the run. They're going to dare Eric Green and the West Virginia offense to try to throw it. Can Trae Ray, Preston Fox, and some, because I know he's not the first wide receiver on the depth chart. I know he's kind of
Hudson Clement is the other guy you're going to think about probably. As far as production wise coming back. So
that's what I mean. It's going to be up to Clement. It's going to be up to Ray to break away and make those plays when Penn State dares them to throw it.
Yeah, and I think Cole Taylor in the middle. He has to be accounted for. I don't know. He's been nursing an injury. He's going to be full go come camp, but we need him to be obviously practice and be in a rhythm by the time that game comes around. He's 6'7", 250 pounds, and he can move. So we're excited about Cole Taylor as well. I think he gets glossed over way too often. He's athletic as a Tyler Warren, not necessarily, but I think he's a good tight end. So Zach, I appreciate you for coming on, man. This has been fun. Guys, don't forget to get over to his channel and support. You guys have been awesome in the chat, so I really do appreciate that. You guys are always awesome. And we'll have to do it. We'll do it again soon, Zach. Like we said, we'll here in a week or two, we'll update each other on how this thing's going, and we'll do some more videos, man.
Yeah, I'm happy to break this down further. We're going to have news, players going to be hurt or, hopefully not. I want to see these rosters both at their best so that, we can truly know who's better, Penn State and, versus West Virginia at the end of the day. So, yeah, I'm happy to come back on your channel and happy to have you back over on my show too.
At the end of the day, I think we're going to know a lot about both teams because the same things aren't true last year to this year. Both teams were first year starting quarterbacks last year. Both teams had a lot of unanswered questions about the season ahead. And we eventually found out both teams were really pretty good, right? Yeah. So I think this year similarly is going to be the great litmus test, but on a maybe even higher level for both, so that's going to be fun to see. Maybe they both end up in the conference title game, even with a win or a loss. You never know.
Yeah, anything's definitely possible in the conference realignment. I can't. It's tough to make any. I like the way the Big Ten does it now, and I think the Big 12 is the same, where it's just the top 2 teams. There's no divisions, so I think that's just better for college football as it is. No, this is new. This season's great because it's all brand new. It's uncharted territory with the playoff, with the conference realignment. I don't think people should take, in terms of long season predictions, be careful who you listen to about those predictions because it's so completely different.
Agreed, man. Smack, I appreciate this comment. He said, Zach, thanks for coming in to play the bad guy. We hate Penn State, but I respect your perspective. It's kind of like I was the face and you were the heel in this. Do you watch wrestling at all?
I don't. Oh, I watch collegiate wrestling because Penn State's number 1 in the.
Well, in pro wrestling, there's obviously a good guy, bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, man. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get off here, guys. And once again, thanks, Zach, for coming on. Thank you guys all for the support.
Appreciate you having me. Thanks, chat.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been real fun. So we'll see you guys again tomorrow. We'll do something tomorrow. Maybe we'll have some news break. You never know what will happen, but we'll figure out a show for tomorrow, basketball, football, or both. All right, guys. Thank you guys for joining. Until then, have a wonderful day, and let's go Mountaineers.